Hello and welcome to today's presentation on explosive power development for the MMA athlete. So I'm just going to leave it here for a second to make sure people can log in. Not like the last time that I messed up, that I had to approve people to log in. So I see a few people there, so that's great. Right, I'll just give it a moment before we get cracking. Hope you guys are all having a nice bank holiday weekend. Okay, let's screen share. Okay, so welcome to today's presentation on explosive power development for the MMA athlete. Now, all these programs that I'm going to go through are designed for MMA guys in particular and girls in particular. However, you can extrapolate this information and put it in place for any athlete, but the focus for today is going to be on the MMA athlete. Now, okay, why isn't this not? Okay, so just to let you know, the next presentation I'm going to be doing, after speaking to a lot of coaches and trainers over the last couple of weeks, particularly with the restrictions that are going on, I'm going to put together a webinar when it's going to be the top 7 tips to make your training business relentlessly resilient. So whether you're a personal trainer, you're a gym owner, whether you're a group trainer or you're an S&C coach, I'm going to cover some really powerful stuff on how to make your business more resilient, how to redefine your business, if you want to call it your focus or your structure and your operational procedures to make your business be more robust, be more profitable, and hopefully give yourself a trajectory or a focus that you can work on later down the line. I've spent a lot of money making mistakes with my facilities, with my education, and I've had to go and study with different guys to help me build a robust business plan to be able to be successful in this business. So rather than making the mistakes in the field, hopefully this presentation will give you some key insights that you can implement the very next day. And that's going to be on April the 17th at 2 p.m. And the link is in my link tree on Instagram, so you can check it out there. Okay, so some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, I have already covered in the ISO circuit video. So if I cover anything that you're not familiar with, just check out that video and that will maybe fill the gaps for you. But today's presentation is going to be an explosive power. If your MMA athlete isn't fit enough, hasn't got the endurance, hasn't got the capacity, that's the video I'd watch in relation to enhancing that component of their physical quality. This is a different component. This is the power development, not necessarily the capacity development, which we'll talk about. So how do you improve your energy system to make your MMA athlete more powerful? Now, particularly in MMA, it's a multi-dimensional sport, a lot of different skill sets. So it's not the same as traditional acceleration sport where you will be sprinting or jumping or changing direction. You need to take into consideration that explosive power can take place, whether it be a punch or a kick or a takedown defense or getting back up off the floor or getting away from the cage. So explosive power for me is very specific to the muscles involved, to the movement involved, and to the athlete. So when you do your athlete profile, when your client comes into you, your athlete comes into you, it's important that we bridge the gap. If they're not fit enough, we improve their fitness. If they're powerful enough, but they don't have the capacity, that's when we work on capacity. If they don't have enough flexibility, we work on that. But for me, a lot of guys are powerful enough for a short period of time, and they don't have the capacity to be able to be explosive throughout the whole round or as the rounds go on. And this energy system training will show you how to enhance that component, not only to improve peak power, but also to enhance the reproducibility of that power. One thing I would say is a lot of people will focus on strength training. And strength training, we're going to talk a lot about that when it comes to explosive power, but you cannot speed somebody up that is really weak. There's a certain level of strength, there's a certain minimum strength quality that you need for somebody to be more explosive. So sometimes a lot of guys will focus on strength to build strength and then hopefully translate that into explosive power, but they may not do it in the correct way. I'm going to talk about some huge mistakes that I made in my career. And from coming from an S&C background, from coming from a team and Olympic lifting and powerlifting and rugby and soccer, well, not so much soccer, but when you're in a team environment, a lot of people will focus on strength training. traditional strength training. And traditional strength training and MMA, guys, in my opinion, it's a very blurred line. And we're going to talk about some key components that hopefully you don't go down that road and make those mistakes. So your exercise prescription. So as an S&C coach, as a trainer, when you put a program in place, you need to know what you're looking to get from that program. So if you write 5 repetitions, well then how fast are those repetitions? How long the repetitions are going to take, as in the tempo? What's the rest interval? So by giving someone 5 repetitions doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be relative strength. Now, if you give someone 5 repetitions, you maybe do an explosive concentric, maybe it's 2-0-x-0 with 3 minutes rest. Well, then you can start to say, well, then that's going to ask someone to improve their fast twitch fibers, their type 2B muscle fibers, the high threshold motor units, and that's what we're going to get from it. So when you write a program, make sure that it has the correct exercise prescriptions targeted to what you're looking to get from that client. But I see guys out there and they're doing a lot of conditioning and a lot of explosive work. They're doing multiple repetitions of box jumps. Doing multiple repetitions of box jumps isn't necessarily going to make someone more powerful. It's going to improve the capacity to do box jumps when they're fatigued, but not necessarily going to improve athletic power development, is what we're looking for and what we're talking about today. Now, we need to know that when you give an exercise prescription, you need to know what muscle fibers and what motor units you're talking to. So we're looking for explosive power. We need to do something fast, or we need to lift something heavy. And in order for that to happen, we're stimulating type 2B muscle fibers, and we're talking to our high threshold motor units. That's the part of the nervous system that stimulates those muscle fibers to exert. However, there's a certain amount of rest that needs to be given in order for you to recall and reproduce the same quality of work. So for me, when we talk about exercise prescription, we're going to talk about a few more things, but the key component is your exercise prescription must adhere to what your actual goal is in that program. And for us, it's going to be explosive power. Next of all, we have to talk about specificity. So for me, when guys are in the gym and they're doing heavy cleans or heavy snatches or doing an explosive movement, we have to take into consideration the principle of specificity. There has to be specific enhancement, a physical enhancement that can cross over to the sport. Now, Ian King, a phenomenal strength coach, talks a lot about that there's no true sport-specific training. And I fully agree with him. The only actual true sport-specific training is playing the sport itself. So in the gym, you're not necessarily trying to replicate movements that will be in the MMA fight itself. What you're looking to do is to enhance the conditioning of their athlete, your strength, your speed, your power, your endurance, your fitness, that can hopefully cross over to the sport itself. But making sure that the specificity of your prescriptions aligns itself to the sport and aligns itself to what the goal is. Guys outside doing a huge amount of fitness work on bikes, huge amount of fitness work on running. Yes, that is improving the cardiovascular fitness, but the specificity and the transfer to sport, in my eyes, is blurred. You will get a general fitness adaptation, but the specificity isn't there. And if you watch the previous video on iso intervals, fitness is muscle specific. Fitness is contraction specific. Fitness is movement specific. So just because you can box doesn't mean you can run. Just because you can run doesn't mean you can wrestle. So fitness from a cardiovascular point of view has to be specific to the sport that you're looking at. And we're going to talk a lot about that as we go on. Now, we have the central nervous system, we have the muscular system, then we have the metabolic concerns. So when you give someone a program, if you're looking for the explosive power, we need to take into consideration that the central nervous system takes from 5 up to 11 times longer to recover, or for us to be able to replicate that amount of effort again. Now, when it comes to the muscular system will recover that a little bit faster because, again, depends on the fibers that we activate, but the muscular system will recover that a little bit faster. But we need to take into consideration the metabolic cost of the activity. So if we're doing a lot of lactic acid training, yes, that can happen in the MMA sport, but we need to also consider that MMA sport is a relative weight sport. And what I mean by that is the classifications are relative to weight. So hypertrophy, and in my eyes, hypertrophy, just for the guys out there, increasing someone's cross-sectional area, increasing someone's muscle mass, may not necessarily enhance performance. If somebody is underweight and they've got a lot of body fat and they need a bit more muscle mass, for sure we need to put muscle mass on them. But we need explosive, we need endurance capacity muscle mass. We don't just want all show and no go. Increasing cross-sectional area just to be bigger doesn't bring any improvement or the potential of improvement in the sport itself. Having bigger arms or having bigger traps won't necessarily be advantageous in the MMA sport. So when we're training and we're putting our programs together, we need to know that, one, what motor units we're activating. Do we need more or less central nervous system recovery? Is this going to put more pressure on the muscular system? Is this going to be more neurological? Is this going to be more metabolic? And once we know that, the reason I say this is I see guys doing box jumps, but they're trying to box jump for a certain height, and they're doing it in a fatigue state. They've got a lot of metabolic cost buildup. So they're trying to do metabolic conditioning and muscular training and explosive movement all in one. And that's what's called cross-sensitization. There's too many questions being asked of the body for the body to be able to answer it. We call that the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands. So when we put a program in place, we need to have these in the back of our mind. What's the neurological cost? What's the muscular demand? And what's the metabolic concerns? So we know the reps, the sets, the tempo, what I call the personalized intensity indicator. And I'm going to talk a lot about that today. I've covered it in other courses in the past. But once we understand this, the key thing about knowing someone's personalized intensity indicator is that if someone can do a box jump, or maybe they do an explosive movement at a certain amount of speed, when the speed drops off, that's when it stops. When you're doing conditioning, you will continue because you want people to be able to overcome fatigue substrates. But when we're looking for power, we're looking for speed, we're looking for explosivity, we need to replicate the same level each time. And when the level drops down, we either extend the rest or we may stop the session. So by assessing where your athlete is, we want to be able to hit that speed multiple times rather than hit the speed once and then every preceding set is slower and slower. You're training your athlete to be slower, and that's not increasing explosive power. Now, I've covered this before, but we'll cover it again a little bit briefly here. We call this the power versus the capacity. So the power of a system is how much power it can generate. The capacity of the system is how long can you sustain that level of power. So when it comes to, let's say, your car, your rate of force development, how fast you can go from 0 to 60, and then how long can your tank, how long can you go for? And that's very simply put. But all the energy systems, and there's a continuum, all the energy systems will have a certain power versus a capacity, a power versus a capacity. And unfortunately, a lot of people are doing what they think are powerful movements, but they're doing it with the goal of improving power, but it's not. The prescriptions are capacity prescriptions. By doing something with very short rest and a very type explosive movement, you're enhancing the capacity, not necessarily the power of the system. And in training, it's very important that if you're working on top end speed, explosive power, dynamic plyometric movements, that you give the body and the central nervous system the correct amount of recovery in order for them to be able to do that again. But the question that I ask you is, well, how do you know if someone is moving the bar slower? Or how do you know if someone's reaction time is slower? Well, that's when things like I think I have one here. That's when stuff like the push band come into play. So the push band, you can actually put it onto your arm, or you can actually put this push band onto a bar and actually see how fast the bar moves. You can put that around someone's waist when they're pushing a sled. You can have timing gates. You can have force plates. There's all these things that you can put in place, but it doesn't have to be very sophisticated. This is they used to be very complicated back in the day, which we called tendo units, where you'd add string to the side of the bar. But this is a very inexpensive, cheap, easy to use, also in groups. It's called train with push, or the push band, that you can put it on the bar and you can see where someone's speed is slowing down. And that's when you may extend the rest, you may change the weight, or you may change the prescriptions so that person is working on their power every single time. So again, it's crucial that we cover this. I cover this much more extensively in my Modified Strongman Training course, which is a whole list of courses, 6 courses in one. And we go through all the energy systems. We go through all the power versus capacity. We go through tools like this, and that's for further research. So if this is interesting towards you, you're gonna put this into your practice, or you've been using this sort of training and you want to find out more, that course will cover it all for you. Now, during the week, I was talking to Robbie, which is one of our coaches here, and he reminded me of this chart that I seen many moons ago. And this is from Charlie Francis, who's a sprint coach. Unfortunately, he's passed away now. And he trained Ben Johnson, and not Ben Johnson, the Canadian sprinter. His name eludes me now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the fact is, we see here that certain movements people will put down here: clean and jerk, and snatch and clean, and sprints, explosive medicine ball movement, plyometric movements, as more towards the 75% plus. Now, unfortunately, research like this, it was all fixed towards guys that are proficient at clean and jerks, that are proficient in snatches and cleans. For me, when it comes to Olympic lifting, I always err on the side of caution. When you have a unit or a time to train an athlete, showing them an activity or a sport that they may take more time to improve their technique and less time getting benefits from it, I might pick an Olympic lifting variation or a high pull or a snatch pull, rather than having the risk of injury of it going over the head or their flexibility issues with catching something. Particularly MMA guys, any professional MMA athlete will have some sort of reoccurring injury, whether it be the hand or the knee or the back, because they're getting beat up all the time. They're doing jiu-jitsu, which can put a lot of pressure on certain joints and submissions and so on. So we want to make sure that in the actual weight room that we're enhancing the explosivity, we're enhancing the strength and speed by also reducing the risk of injury. And by picking exercises like this, we may increase that. However, we have medicine ball work there. We have plyometric jumps that we can use. We have sprints that we can use. So it doesn't always have to be a weight room activity. It can be jumping or throwing a med ball, or, med ball slams, or heavy medicine ball tosses and so on. There's a multitude of activities that we can use to enhance explosive strength. For me, there's always a level of building up a level of strength and then improving the speed of it, improving the level of strength and the speed of it. And because MMA is a relative sport activity, we can't spend too much time in the hypertrophy zone. If we do, we're going to increase the weight and then we're going to change the weight class. So we're working on relative strength, and then we're working on endurance, working on relative strength. And in that relative strength, we can work on increasing strength, power, strength, power, strength, power. We can stay in that low rep range, that high threshold motor units, those fast twitching muscle fibers which have less capacity for hypertrophy, which won't change their weight class. So again, when we understand these muscle fibers we're activating, we're understanding the role of the central nervous system and how they switch on these muscle fibers explosively, fast, quick, and then we optimize the recovery. That's when we really make an athlete very explosive, but has that reproducibility to maintain that level. Now, here, what we have is the top 5 explosive methods that I found to be very effective. And I'm going to go through the 5 of them. I'm going to briefly talk about them, and then we're going to go into depth into the very last one. So this one here is, they're not in any order, by the way. So just list it down. They're not in any order of priority. We have the rest pause method. The rest pause method, where someone will do a repetition and they'll pause for a second and go again. That can be done for hypertrophy. That can be done for, endurance, can be done for anything. But what it does is it allows that person to reset and then go explosive again. And in this situation, we would be relative strength parameters. So 5 repetitions and below. A shorter time under tension, you're talking maybe 10 to 20 seconds maximum. Or there's another method called cluster training. Cluster training, where you might do a squat, you put it back in for 10 to 15 seconds and you go again. So rather than doing 5 consecutive reps in a row, you do 5 intermittent singles. You can also do that for 3s. It doesn't necessarily have to be 5s. But what it does is it allows that person that mini break, that intra-set rest, to be able to have that maximum motor unit activation again. So it's like doing your 5 repetitions with a few seconds, 15 seconds break in between it. Very effective for MMA guys. I particularly like trap bar deadlifts for guys, because it gets them in a good postural position. I can change the height quite easy, and their technique is quite solid in that position. And then we also have here Olympic lift variations. I like this for Olympic lifting variations: clean pulls, hand clean pulls, snatch pulls, because the complexity is very easy. You could have any athlete come into the gym and do a clean pull from the hang with very little risk of injury. We know that the risk of injury is greater with the more you go towards the ground, but there's no reason why we have to put our athlete in that risky position. Or you could do, trap bar jumps, which is a great option. So this is one of the very simple ways of getting someone explosive power enhancement. But remember, we need to build a certain level of strength before we go into that. But the rest pause method, the cluster training method, and using Olympic variations is a very, very, very effective tool. The next one we have here is number 2, is the triphasic training method. Now, this was developed by Carl Dietz. I think I put his name in there. I didn't. My apologies. I should have had his name in there. I thought I had. So Carl Dietz, go back here. So Carl Dietz has this method called the triphasic training system. And what it does is it works on accentuating the eccentric portion of motion, then it works on the isometric portion of the lift, and then it works on the concentric part of the lift. So you might do 2 weeks maybe focusing on the eccentric part, then 2 weeks focusing on the isometric part, possibly in the bottom position, and then 2 weeks focusing on the concentric part. And he will have that specific tempo to elicit that part of the motion. Now, I think, and I've used this, and he's a very clever guy, very knowledgeable guy. I've communicated with him online. He's a very helpful coach. And what I would say is this system of accentuating the lowering phase, accentuating the holding phase, and accentuating the concentric phase is very effective when it comes to MMA. MMA, you'll be wrestling against a cage. You'll be on the ground. You'll be isometric for a moment. You'll be eccentric as you're trying to decelerate maybe a takedown defense, or you'll be very explosive at certain times. But in order for you to really elicit soft tissue enhancement, as in ligaments, tendon, the ability to contract and relax, that when someone can contract a muscle really fast and relax a muscle really fast, that's when people really become very explosive. The ability to contract a muscle is in relation to how well other secondary muscles can relax. So in order for you to contract your let's say your tricep or your chest, you need your bicep to be able to lengthen, your lats to be able to lengthen, and that is that synchronicity, it's that communication. And when people use this triphasic method, the coordination from a muscular system point of view, from a motor unit synchronization point of view, from a rate coding point of view, and from a biomechanical point of view and proprioception is phenomenal. So if there's only one thing you get from this, guys, from the whole presentation today, the triphasic method can be used, well, in my opinion, in loads of different athletes, but particularly with MMA guys that may be quite strong concentrically, but could be very weak isometrically and very weak eccentrically. So by building up these components of the contraction type, it improves fitness, but it also allows them to be explosive from an isometric point of view, from an eccentric point of view, and from a concentric point of view, which we've all wrestled with guys or we've done boxing. These guys are super strong because they have that good communication of all the physical qualities. And that comes from a concentric, isometric, and eccentric point of view as well. So number 3 there. Here, what we have is this method is called the contrast training method. So you've probably heard about this before, is where you would do 1 to 3 repetitions of a relatively heavy load, not a super 1 RM or a 3 RM. You're probably talking around a 5 or a 6 RM for 1 to 3 repetitions, and then go do a dynamic or ballistic movement. So for example, you do a back squat at about an 80% of your 1 RM for 1 to 2 repetitions, and then you might do some bounding or box jumps or depth jumps afterwards. So you're activating the nervous system, and then you're doing an actual ballistic movement. Now, then there's another system called the French contrast method, where there's actually 4 systems where you do again the same thing. You load the body, then you go do a ballistic movement, then you do an assisted movement. You might do another movement where you're being pulled back down to the ground with bands, and then you finish off on an assisted movement. So there's 4 different systems of stimulating, enhancing, but definitely what we're looking at. A lot of research in contrast training. It's been around for years. The French contrast training method, Carl Dietz talks a lot about it on his website, so I definitely suggest you look into it, and his triphasic book, which is brilliant, by the way. Huge book, a lot of details. Again, he's focused a lot with teams, but it can be extrapolated and put into place for nearly any sport, I believe. And number 4 here, we have what's called the post-activation potential. That's a situation where you do something similar. You might lift a heavy load and then go do another load for less repetitions, or for more repetitions, less weight. So for example, you might do 1 heavy bench press for around an 85%, and then you might go and do 6 repetitions at a weight that's slightly reduced. But because you've had that activation enhancement, you may be able to get more repetitions with it. Or you do a heavy squat for 1 repetition, and then you go to a lighter load, and what you would ideally normally just do 3, you try to do 5 repetitions. And you can do that with lots of different things. You can do isometric holds and then go do a dynamic movement, but it can be done very well. Then we have what's called accommodating resistance. And accommodating resistance is where we would add bands or chains or bungees to a barbell movement. So like deadlifting with bands, squatting with chains, and so on. Now, for me, this is an advanced form of training. As you come up in a squat, you actually get stronger. When you come up in a deadlift, you'll get stronger. But as you come up, if you've got chains on the bar, as you stand up, the load actually gets heavier. The same thing when you bench press. Your weakest position is down in your chest. As you extend your arms, you get that a little bit stronger, and the chains will add on an additional weight. Also, adding bands on puts a lot of tension, particularly through the tendon and the joint capsule. So it can be very advantageous for advanced lifters, for people that are competent in those lifts. Am I saying all MMA guys should bench press? I'm not actually saying that. I'm not a big fan of bench pressing for MMA guys, but I do like squatting. Now, on that, I don't want to get on my soapbox. But when it comes to squatting, a lot of guys aren't proficient with a straight bar on their back. So I use a lot of safety bars. And the reason being is I can get guys into the gym day one, do a safety bar back squat with perfect technique. And when they get fatigued and they get to that level where they may have fatigue in the lower back or glutes, they can still maintain relatively good position. However, on a straight bar, they're compromised and they tend to lose their technique more. Now, that could be from a coaching point of view, that could be from a biomechanical point of view, that can be just from a young training age. The actual MMA guys may not have a long training age in the weight room. So you can use accommodating resistance with a safety bar. You can use accommodating resistance with a trap bar. So why ask our MMA guys and force them into straight barbell work, straight barbell bench pressing, straight barbell deadlifting, straight bar back squatting, when they don't necessarily have to. They're only doing the weight room work to enhance their activity. If we use a safety bar, a trap bar, and maybe a Cadillac bar, or a Swiss bar on the bench pressing, there's less risk of injury. The technique can be done much more effectively, and the crossover can be much more enhanced to the sport itself. So for me, I think a lot of people are trying to force strength training, bodybuilding, Olympic lifting, powerlifting training into a sport where it shouldn't be that way. We should take the science that has been developed over years and years of research when it comes to S&C, but then take the sport and then see what we need to enhance in the sport, and then take what we choose for the athlete and what suits them. But a lot of guys are doing bodybuilding and powerlifting and Olympic lifting style programs for athletes, where we should take the systems of training, we should take the movement of training, but not necessarily force our guys to be cleaning. Not necessarily force our guys to be snatching or bench pressing, where because the research is in that, the crossover is minimal, in my opinion, when it comes to those movements, because again, you can enhance strength, you can for sure, but increasing someone's deadlift, straight bar deadlift, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a better MMA fighter. But we can use deadlift variations and trap bar variations and rack pulls and all these variations to enhance athletic development. Not only, but I'm saying just take it with a pinch of salt, that we shouldn't always be forcing old school methods of training into our athletes here. Next we have is what's called eccentric hooks. Eccentric hooks, where you'll put hooks onto the bar. As you lower down, they fall off the back, so you can come down with a heavier load and come up with a lighter load. Can be very beneficial. And then this last one here is isometronics, or what Bill Kramer calls functional isometrics, is where you'll do isometric holds in different ranges. And it's normally 6 to 8 inches of a range of motion, where you might do maybe 5 repetitions. On the 5th repetition, you hold against the pins for a maximum contraction, and then see can you exert another one again, but it's in a smaller range of motion. And I think a squat rack is one of the most vital tools any S&C coach can have, particularly from the safety point of view, but from the usability, from rack pulls and partial pulls and squatting to the pins and doing functional isometrics. It can be extremely effective. And then the last one here is one we're going to talk a lot about, is the actual metabolic functional training or modified strongman training prescription, but for power development. And that's the key thing. You can use metabolic conditioning, you can use functional movement, you can use any form of training once you have the correct prescription of the energy system, the correct power to capacity ratio, you're known the central nervous system recovery, you're known the muscular recovery, and you're known the metabolic concerns. And once you know that, we're already on the right track. So we're 28 minutes in, and I'm right on schedule for a change. So here we have a little chart. I'm sure you guys have all seen this, where they work off what's called your 1 RM percentage of load, so 100%. Now, when you have an MMA athlete, they may not necessarily know they're 100%. And to be honest with you, a lot of MMA guys will only have done a short amount of resistance training, proper resistance training with technique and cues and tempo and rest interval and so on. So they may not necessarily know that. Plus, when someone comes into the gym, they're always evolving. So they might come in with a bench press of 100 kilos. But as you condition them and make them stronger, that will ever change. So this percentage will always be relative to the person. And that's why I don't like to fix myself on these charts. The speed of the movement, the power of the movement, the feedback from your athlete, that should dictate how many reps and how many sets you do. There's also, this is from the science of sports performance. This next one here, guys, I think a lot of people would be familiar with. It's been around for so many years. And what this is, I got this from Louis Simmons when I did an internship with him in Ohio many years ago. So Per-Lippen's chart, what it would basically say is what the percentage of 1RM you should do, roughly, how many reps you should do per set, and what's the optimal number of total reps and total sets, and so on. So it depends how many reps you're going to do in each set, will dictate how many sets you're going to do. But the optimal range is going to be there. As you see, the first one, 55 to 65%, that's what they would classify as, you know, sort of endurance for strength training. 70 to 80%, they're looking at more hypertrophy. 80 to 90%, this is the strength training world. It's an Olympic lifting chart. 80 to 90% is more strength, and then 90% plus is more power. So this is what has been around for years, and it's a powerlifting, strength training, Olympic lifting chart, because these guys are working on the percentages, they're working on the numbers all the time. However, the crossover to MMA is not the same. When you're dealing with a strength athlete, i.e. Olympic lifting, or powerlifting, this is where they live. They live in numbers, they live in kilograms, they live in reps, and so on, and they live in getting that technique for those snatch, clean and jerk, and bench press, squat, and deadlift. That's where they live. That's those movements that they live in, those 5 movements. But when it comes to the multidiscipline approach that MMA guys have to condition, you can't say, oh, I'm going to use 90%, that's going to make my guy more powerful. That's not the way it works. We need to look at things from a different point of view, and a more holistic, a more science-driven point of view. So let's talk about method 5, where we talked about using metabolic conditioning to enhance power. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So here we have an assault bike. So what we do is we do 5 sets on the assault bike. We give them 10, it's 1 repetition. The time of retention is 10 seconds. We go 10 seconds as hard as we can. And then we have 50 seconds rest. 50 seconds rest, and we repeat that 5 times. That's 1 round, if you want to call it 1 round. Now, this here where I say the question mark is the personalized intensity indicator. This is crucial. This is the crucial part of this whole program. If you want your guy and girl to be explosive and have that explosivity, to switch on those type 2B muscle fibers, to elicit high threshold motor units, to improve their body's ability to exert and recover fast, we need to find out what wattage that they need to hit to get this PII. So you get them on the assault bike. You give them a bit of a warm up, maybe five minutes or so, get the heart rate up, and then you give them 3 opportunities to get their max wattage. For me, there's a lot of stats when it comes to cycling with wattage, but an assault bike isn't necessarily a road bike. So the crossover is correlated, but not exactly 100%. So for me, what I like to say is around 10 watts per kilo of body weight. So if you're 100 kilos, you ideally should be hitting 1,000 watts. And you can find this out. And then what we do is we say to the athlete, okay, you're going to go for 10 seconds. And let's say they're 70 kilos. And let's say they've got up to around 700 watts or 800 watts comfortably. Then what we say is, okay, we're going to go for 10 seconds when you hit 700 watts. So they go on the assault bike, they get going, they're warmed up, they go, they hit 700, they stay there for 10 seconds. You count to them, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10, and then they recover. They take their hands off, they put their feet on the front of the bike, they move their arm, they get the recovery. In 50 seconds, the hands go back on, boom, they go again, back up to that 700 and sustain it for 10 seconds, 50 seconds break, and they repeat that. When we have a personalized intensity indicator, we know there's no drop off. We know that is going to hit it each time. And if you want, you can err on the side of caution. You maybe bring it down to maybe 600 or 500. And then as you feel the athlete has more, you go up and up and up. But what we need to do is to see where their ceiling is initially. And then what I would normally do was I would round it down to the nearest 100. So let's say someone gets 750, I'll just come down to 700. Or they might get 770, I'll still come down to 700 for the first challenge set, and I'll make a note of that. And then maybe next session, we'll say 750. But the goal is we can't just give them time. You can go up and down like that for 10 seconds. That's not going to get you more powerful. So we need to know what their intensity potential is. So we're going back to it each time. If you get a guy on the bike and he can't even break 500 watts or 300 watts, well, then you shouldn't even be doing power training with that person. That person needs to improve their strength to be able to get it higher. So this is where the ISO circuit will come in. So you're going to have to know, is this person powerful enough, strong enough to get powerful, or is this person too weak I need to get them stronger before we get them more powerful. So it's a step approach. You cannot speed somebody up that is weak. So we need to make them as strong as they physically can be and assess their level of power, and then let them go back to that power replication multiple times. And this program will do that. Then what I'll do here is I'll give them a full 60-second break after those 5 sets, and we will do that 3 times. So that's like 3 rounds. Now that, guys, is challenging, is super challenging. But let's look at it this way. When we look at energy system training, and I've talked a lot about this and I've covered it in length in the Modified Strongman training course, we talk about total work time. So what is the total work time there? If each round is 5 minutes and we've got a minute break in between each one, and we're doing 3 of them in total. So we've got 5 minutes plus 1 is 6 minutes. 5 minutes plus 1 minute is 6. That's 12 minutes. Then we have the 5 more minutes. So we've only got 21 minutes. The last minute, the break doesn't count. So if we've 21 minutes done in this, that's not 21 minutes. What am I saying? 5, 15, and 2 is 17. So 17 minutes. Sorry, bad maths there. 17 minutes in total. That's the whole session lasts 17 minutes. But if we look at how much work they've done, the total work time, how much that person has actually done. So the total session is 17 minutes, but how much work they've done is 10 seconds every minute. So they're doing only 50 seconds in the first round. Second round, they're doing 50 seconds. Third round, they're doing 50 seconds. They're only actually doing 150 seconds of quality work. So your athletes can recover if that's the amount of volume you're putting them through. So it's important that we're not necessarily looking for a lot of volume. We're looking for less volume, but high reproducibility and high getting that power back again. And this program works exceptionally well for that. And I like the assault bike because it gets the upper body and lower body involved at the same time. So hopefully this is making sense to you guys. So let's look at a different system here. Here, what we might do is we might do the ski erg, and I've just put it in here because I've changed it. When it comes to improving MMA power, we cannot do the same muscle group all the time. As I've said multiple times, fitness is muscle specific. So if you only ever bike or only ever run, your aerobic systems will enhance in that area. The same way your power systems will improve in that area. But we need to change the muscular system, the orientation, the prime movers, the agonists, the fixators. So we're going from an assault bike to a ski erg, it will massively change. Again, you get someone on a ski erg, you get them to ski to see where their power is, see where their power intensity indicator is, the personalized intensity indicator is. You see where it is, you ascertain, okay, maybe they got the 500 watts, and we're going to give them 400. So when you maintain 400 watts skiing down, you maintain it for 10 seconds, you got 50 seconds break, we repeat again. And we follow the same system there. 5 sets in a row, 1 minute break, repeat that 3 times. So again, not a lot of volume, only 150 seconds of total work time. The total session time is 17 minutes. So this can be done at the end of an MMA session. It can be done at the start of an MMA session. It can be done as the second part of that day's training, because we need to manage the units of training that these guys are doing. But very effective. And you will see this. You will see your wrestling massively improve, particularly with this fighting for underhooks and clinch game and against the cage. The lats and the chest and the shoulders and the triceps get a lot of involvement. And using the ski erg will have a real high crossover into that itself. I've trained a lot of Olympic wrestlers over in Azerbaijan. We actually won nine medals at the last Olympics in Rio. And when I'm training these guys, we need to make them fit for their sport. So fit to run, fit to bike is not something that we do a lot of. We do very specific conditioning that has a more direct carryover to the sport itself. Next, we have the rower. Now, with the rower, you need to change your style of rowing. So if you're doing rowing as in an exercise, you go for a longer stride, you make sure you go all the way in, your heels come off. But when you're doing power stroke in a rower, it's not always all the way back in. You try to keep your heels on the actual platform and your stride might be a little bit shortened. But what we need to do is we need to give these people an indicator to go towards. So we do a little test to see where their power capacity is. We see what they can hit from a wattage point of view. And then we give them a wattage target. Now, I've given them 15 seconds. Reason being is there is a little bit of recall back into the machine. So you get a little bit of a mini break. It takes a few strokes to get going. So for me, I've made this a little bit longer, which is 15 seconds of work, 45 seconds break. And I'm making it very specific. Now, I do realize that if we were to look at the work to rest ratio, this is 1-3, where the 10 to 50 was 1-5. And I know that when you look at from the nervous system point of view, that may not necessarily be the optimal recovery for those fast twitch fibers to recover. but we're taking this and we're putting it into the MMA world. So we're trying to allow our guy to be as powerful as we can with the shortest amount of rest so they can reproduce it in a high octane fight. And again, 60 seconds break in between each round, and we repeat 3 times. So I think you can see the method where I'm going here with this, that there's a system to it. There's a method to it, that we're not just outside running. We're not just hitting the bag. There has to be a system that we're enhancing the body's muscular endurance, muscular strength, muscular power, central nervous system, enzymatic function, that we can be fast and explosive multiple times throughout the fight. So this is the complex. So let's look at something different here. So here what we do is the A exercise as an assault bike. So instead of the last few ones we did 3 rounds on the same machine. 5 sets, break, 5 sets, break, 5 sets, break. Now what we're doing is we're doing the first round on the assault bike, exact same system. 5 sets, 10 seconds of work, 50 seconds off with a minute break in between. But then the second round, or the B station, we've gone to the ski erg. So our arms are going to be blasted from being on the assault bike. Then we go into the ski erg, our body's going to be fatigued. And then the third round, we actually go onto the rower. So here what I've done is I've done maybe a week of training on the assault bike, a week of training on the ski erg, or a week of training on the rower. So they know, they're able to reproduce that. They've done 15 sets in total. They've done 5 in the first round, 5 in the second round, 5 in the third round. Now they're going to do 5 rounds. But now they're changing machines. So every 60 seconds break, they change to a different machine. And in the order, we can change anything we want. But I cannot stress this enough. You do this for any athlete, their level of MMA conditioning will go through the roof. Now, I haven't once mentioned heart rate here at all. However, I would put a heart rate monitor on my athlete to see what the recovery is like. But I'm looking at the indicator, as in if they can sustain their wattage. I'm also looking at the recovery of how well it drops down. Using a heart rate monitor for intensity of anaerobic fibers does not make sense. The anaerobic system is in the absence of oxygen. We're looking for the fast twitch fibers. We're looking for creatine phosphate. We're looking for glycogen. We're not looking at oxygen. So that's not our main fuel source. It is a component, don't get me wrong. It is a component, but it's not the driving force. So although I would use a heart rate monitor to assess decline of heart rate during the 50 seconds and during the interset rest, as in the minute rest in between each round, I wouldn't say it's the key driving force. The key driving force is if that person can maintain their personalized intensity indicator. But again, you can mix this around any machine you want once you have that power system. It could be pushing a sled with a strap on so they can see what the speed is like. You can put this onto your waist and you can actually assess yourself pushing a sled. It could be doing a barbell movement, which if you're assessing the power, because we need to maintain that each time. So now let's look at a different one here. So this is what we would call an energy system workout. So we're advancing this on a bit more here. So here we have a few different workouts. Workout 1 to 2 of this week might be assault bike. And we might just do 10 sets where we're doing 5 repetitions, and the repetition is 10 seconds on, 50 seconds off, and we're doing 60 seconds break after each one. That's only 2 rounds. The first week, we're doing 2 workouts, both on the assault bike, but we're only doing the equivalent of 2 rounds. Then the next week, we do a workout 3 and 4. We're doing the rower, very same thing. Now we've got the 15 sets. So we've actually done 3 rounds technically. 20 seconds of work, 40 seconds off, and we give ourselves 60 seconds break in between each one of the 5. Yeah, so it's break after each one. Then the next week, week 3, we do 2 workouts again. Ski erg, we're maintain 15 sets, 5 sets of 15 on, 45 off, 60 seconds, so 3 rounds again. So you see what I'm doing? This every week, something else is changing. And the last week, we go on to the bike erg. So we're doing a different sort of bike this way. So this is 4 weeks of training, and it's only 8 workouts in total. So 2 workouts each week that you can easily put in to see where your MMA guys are right now. And the key thing that we're looking for here is, are we able to replicate the power? And once we're able to replicate the power, then we move on to enhancing the power. But this will massively improve our athlete's ability to have explosive power and reproduce it multiple times in the gym with a higher and more effective crossover into the actual cage itself. So let's look at a different system. As you can see, there's loads of permutations. You can really do anything you want. But when you write programs, are you putting the total session time, the total work time? Are you putting the rest interval, the sets, the tempo? Is there a system? Is there a progression? Is there an evaluation tool that you can see? Was this program effective or not? And we have time now. This is where, and fitness should never be something that should be questionable going into the cage. Is one of the things from a physical point of view that we can definitely make sure that we have it. But fitness is specific. Fitness to reproduce power, fitness to maintain running, fitness to recover during rounds is all specific. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to have our fighters as explosive as possible with the best amount of recovery and replenish themselves during the rounds break that they can. Here's another one. So on this one here, we have workout. A, an assault bike, 5 sets. Again, it's very similar system. B will be the rower. So we do 5 rounds on the assault bike. We do 5 rounds on the rower. Then we do 5 rounds on a ski erg. Then we do 5 rounds on the aerodyne bike. So, sorry, I'll go back onto that one. No, go back. Sorry about that. Flick through these. This is giving me a bit of jip, this transporter. So when we're putting the program together, you can see that there's a multitude of different ways. We have the assault bike, then we have the ski erg, and then we have the actual rower at the end. So this is where we're doing a different round each one. Then when we come to the next system, we can just do a pair workout where we're just focusing on 2 workouts on the assault bike, 2 workouts on the rower, 2 workouts on the ski erg, 2 workouts on the bike. Then we can actually do it in a system. We're actually going through each different machine where we do 5 rounds on the assault bike. Then after those 5 rounds, we move down to do 5 sets on the rower, as in the B exercise. Then we do 5 rounds on the ski erg, and then we do 5 rounds on the bike. Here, what we're doing is 20 sets in total, but what we're doing is 4 rounds. So we're improving that capacity. Maybe someone's maybe going into a title fight that may be doing 5 rounds eventually. So conditioning them for 3 rounds isn't advantageous. So we may need to bridge the gap before they go to a 5-round fight. Then what we have is maybe somebody is in a 5-round fight. It's going to be 5 minutes, 5 rounds of 5 minutes. It's going to be a title defense that we need to step things up a bit more. And that's when we need to elicit different stimulation. So here we have an A1 exercise. So we do the assault bike for 1 round with no break. Now, the reason why I have no break there is, guys, we're going to grab a recovery as in 60 seconds, but it's not in the program there. So my apologies. That should be 5 minutes, 60 seconds break. Move on to the next one. The rower. We have the rower. No, my apologies. I've done that. I have done that right. So what we do is we do the first set, i.e. the first 10 seconds on the assault bike. Then we take a 50 seconds break. Then we move on to a rower. We do 20 seconds on the rower. We take a 40 seconds break. We go to a ski erg. We do the ski erg for 15 seconds with our 45 seconds break. Then we move on to our bike. We do our bike for 10 seconds, and then we move on to kettlebell swings for 10 seconds. So what I've done is I've broken them into 5 stations, but ultimately they're in 1 minute blocks. So we have 10 seconds of work, 50 seconds, if you want to call it rest. We move on to the next station. 20 seconds of work, 40 seconds rest, move on to the next station. And then at the very end of the 5 minutes, that's when you have your complete minute rest, i.e. your rest prescription, as in the end of the set. And we would do that 2, 3, 4, 5 times, depending what sort of how many rounds we condition our athlete for. And the difference here is they're actually only doing 1 set. So 1 on the assault, 10 seconds on the assault bike, 20 seconds rower, 15 seconds ski erg, 10 seconds the bike, and then 10 seconds on the kettlebell swings. And in each one of those, we have the remainder of the minute to get to the next station. So they're all in minute blocks. And for this particular person, we're doing 5 rounds. So we're conditioning them towards a 5 round at the end. So as you can see, rather than staying in the same station, this one here is very advanced, very hard. But because we will know at this point what the power is supposed to be, or the wattage is supposed to be on all of those machines, and how many swings they need to get in 10 seconds, that's when we can make sure we're maintaining that peak level of performance. So sorry about that. Hopefully I clarified that there. Sometimes when I edit these slides, sometimes the charts are from the previous ones and I forget to change them. My apologies. So just to let you know, guys, I hope you found that information helpful. The next presentation we'll be doing will be on the 17th, and it's going to be on the top 7 tips for you guys as trainers, as S&C coaches, or as gym owners. Mistakes that I've made. You know, I spent a lot of money learning from guys, business guys, coaches. And unfortunately, with we've had an economic downturn at the moment. We went through a recession many years ago when we were growing our business. So I've been in this game long enough and learned from some leading experts, learned from very high profile executives and CEOs on how you can make your business more resilient. Now, a lot of guys may be doing one-to-one training, maybe more towards teams or group training or fitness classes, but we'll talk a lot about that. So hopefully you can join me then. on Saturday. We'll cover that on Saturday the 17th at 2 p.m. The link is in my Instagram. If you found any of this information helpful, guys, please do share it and increase the followers on Instagram. What I'm doing is, so because we're all in lockdown, I'm actually going to extend a 75% discount on the Modified Strongman Training course, which I'm going to extend until we're out of lockdown. So if you're a coach at home, you're looking to learn these systems, you're looking to learn how to design these programs, how to put together strongman training. In this course, there's 6 courses. One is on corrective exercise, one is on how to coach group sessions, one is on program design, one is on strongman training, which is the core thing. Then we're actually going to have a live event where guys come into the gym itself and we go through strongman training exercise and so on. And the last one is you get entered into a community where we do ongoing case studies, ongoing questions and answers, where we do stuff like this, where we may pick a sport or an activity or an athlete and we'll do case studies like that. So hopefully you can check that out. There's a 75% discount, which is massive, and it's full of information. I'm really proud of that course, guys, and I know you'll get a lot of information from that so we can maximize while we're in this stupid lockdown. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I appreciate your time on a bank holiday weekend. Please do enjoy your Easter, and thank you for your attention.